She thought it would be the happiest day of her life, a celebration of unity, of love, of peace between two of the most powerful noble houses in France. But just 7 days after, Marguerite de Valois walked down the aisle. The Seine was thick with blood, and the church bells rang, not for celebration, but for death. It was a wedding that promised hope and delivered horror. By the time the slaughter ended, 3,000 lay dead in the streets of Paris, 37 nobles executed, thousands more hunted, tortured, or forced into exile. The wedding had become a trap, gilded noose tightened under silk banners, and the scent of lily. This is the story of the wedding that ended in 37 executions, and the terrifying truth behind the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. Paris, August 1572. The city is choking on heat. The streets are packed, foul, alive with tension. But inside the Louvre Palace, there is only silk and gold. The halls are scented with rosewater and pine. Tapestries hang heavy on the stone walls. Musicians tune their lutes. Courtiers in powdered ruffs whisper and smile behind painted fans. On August 18th, beneath the soaring ribs of Notre Dame, a French Catholic princess stands across from her Protestant bridegroom. Marguerite de Valois, daughter of Catherine de' Medici and sister to the king, is being wed to Henry of Navarre, a Huguenot, a Protestant, a man from the other side of France's religious civil war. For years, France has been torn apart by bloodshed between Catholics and Protestants. 7 brutal wars, countless villages razed, children orphaned, women burned, men strung up from trees as heretics. This wedding is supposed to be a turning point, a royal marriage to bind the factions. To silence the gunfire, end the executions, stop the madness. But not everyone in that cathedral is praying for peace. Some are only pretending, because while the bride and groom exchange vows, another plan is unfolding hidden behind lace veils and royal smiles. A trap is being set. Guest list is the kill list. 3 days later, it is the night of August 21st. Paris is still tense, but the celebrations have not stopped. There are dances, masquerades, feasts. Protestant nobles from all over France have poured into the city, invited by the crown, protected by a royal guarantee of safety. At the heart of it all is Gaspard de Coligny, Admiral of France, hero to the Huguenots, and to Catherine de' Medici, the Queen Mother, an unbearable thorn in her side. Coligny has grown dangerously close to King Charles IX. Too close. He whispers into the young king's ear. He wants France to go to war with Spain. He wants to spread Protestant power, and he's made powerful enemies. On August 22nd, just 4 days after the wedding, Coligny steps out onto a quiet Paris street and a bullet rips through his hand and into his arm. He collapses in blood. The assassin escapes. It is meant to be a warning, a silent signal to leave. But Coligny does not die, and that becomes the most dangerous outcome of all. Inside the Louvre, panic spreads. Protestant leaders demand justice. They say the Catholics tried to murder one of their own, that the Queen Mother herself ordered the hit, that this marriage was never about peace, it was about control. For hours, the tension coils tighter. Then, sometime in the dark hours between August 23rd and 24th, a decision is made. No one knows exactly who gave the final order. Some say Catherine whispered into her son's ear. Others say King Charles, paranoid and manipulated, shouted it himself in a fit of rage. Then kill them all. Kill them all, so none are left to accuse me. What's certain is this. At midnight on August 24th, the church bells of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois begin to ring. And with that sound, the massacre begins. It starts at the Admiral's bedside. Wounded and weak, Coligny is dragged from his bed by a mob of soldiers. They stab him through the chest, throw his body from the window, and hack it to pieces in the courtyard below. Then they hang what remains of him from a butcher's hook elsewhere in Paris. Soldiers bang on doors. Names are read from secret lists. Nobles in nightclothes are dragged into the streets. Women scream. Children run. The slaughter is indiscriminate and unrelenting. Within hours, the Seine is choked with corpses. Men are hunted like animals, their bodies displayed in alleys as warnings. Heads are stuck on pikes. Protestant homes are looted, burned, desecrated. And the wedding that was meant to unite a nation becomes the bait in a national bloodletting bygone. Over 2,000 are dead, and this is only the beginning. The killing did not end with sunrise. As the first light of August 24th cut through the haze over Paris, it revealed a city transformed into a graveyard. Blood congealed between cobblestones. Bodies sprawled across bridges. The sounds of celebration were replaced by weeping, and screams muffled behind bolted doors. But even as the horror became undeniable, even as neighbors turned on neighbors, the gates of the city remained closed. No one could leave. King Charles IX, young and increasingly unhinged, ordered the gates of Paris sealed. No exit for the Protestants. No mercy. No reprieve. And outside the Louvre, newlywed Henry of Navarre, husband to the king's sister, one of the most powerful Protestant lords in Europe, was now a prisoner in all but name. He had spent his wedding night surrounded by torchlight and music. He would spend the next weeks surrounded by armed guards, forced to choose between two fates, death or conversion. And still, the violence spread. The news of Coligny's murder and the bloodshed in Paris did not stop at the city walls. It ignited like wildfire. Over the next weeks, the killing reached far beyond the capital into Rouen, Lyon, Orleans, Toulouse, Bordeaux. City after city fell into frenzy. The death toll exploded. Some say 5,000, others say 10,000. But the truth? The truth was likely closer to 20,000. This was not a riot. It was not a spontaneous purge. It was a decision. A campaign. And for many of the Protestant nobles who had come to Paris in peace, the wedding was the first step into a carefully orchestrated trap. 30-7 were executed in the days that followed. One by one, publicly, decisively. Some were dragged into dungeons and tortured before death. Others were offered mock trials, verdicts already decided. A few were killed by the very guards who had sworn to protect them. The message was clear. There would be no peace, no tolerance, no Protestant future in the Kingdom of France. And no one, not even the groom, was safe. Inside the Louvre, Catherine de' Medici walked the halls in black. Observers said she did not cry, did not waver. She had played the game of dynasties her entire life. Daughter of the Medici banking empire, queen to a weak king. Now, the matriarch of a royal house crumbling beneath civil war. She believed France could only survive if it was united under one religion, hers. Some historians call her a monster. Others, a mother clawing for control in a nation devouring itself. What cannot be denied is this. She stood at the center of the bloodshed. Her enemies were dead. Her son was broken. And her daughter, the bride, was trapped in a palace dripping with death. Marguerite de Valois, caught between duty and horror, tried to shield her husband, tried to stop the blood from seeping under her door. But she was only a queen by name. The real power was elsewhere, and even she was not above suspicion. In the weeks after the massacre, rumors spread that she too had made a list, that she had whispered names to her mother, names of Protestant guests she did not trust, friends, lovers. No one was sure what she knew. No one ever would be. Because Marguerite never told the full truth, not to the court, not to the historians, not even in her memoirs. All that remains is this sentence written decades later in her own trembling hand. That night was so horrible. I believe the world had ended. And in a way, it had. The massacre shattered the illusion that France could be healed through diplomacy. That tolerance could be bought with a wedding dot. In the decades that followed, civil war returned with a vengeance. France would endure another 20 years of slaughter. Entire towns wiped from the map, millions displaced. Religious hatred passed from one generation to the next like an inheritance. Henry of Navarre, the reluctant groom, survived, but only by converting to Catholicism under duress. His conversion was false. He knew it. His captors knew it. Everyone knew it, but the performance bought him time. He would wait, watch, endure, until the crown came to him. And when he finally became King Henry IV, he would declare, "Paris is worth a mass," once again changing his faith to hold his throne. But in 1572, he was just a man who had come to marry a queen and nearly left in a coffin. The wedding that began with whispered promises had become one of the bloodiest betrayals in European history. But what happened to the families of the executed? What happened to the children, the servants, the survivors who watched their lords butchered in the streets? In the days that followed, the smell of death clung to the narrow alleyways of Paris like damp fog, but the court moved on. Bodies were carted away. Blood was scrubbed from the palace stones. Windows were shuttered. And as the bells tolled for the dead, official proclamations began to appear blaming the Huguenots themselves for a plot to assassinate the king. It was a lie, polished and broadcast with terrifying efficiency. The massacre was no longer a crime. It was a preemptive strike, a necessary act, a purification of France. And those who had survived it, children orphaned, wives widowed, loyal Protestant servants left trembling in their master's blood, were now branded as traitors. They were no longer citizens of France. They were ghosts, enemies. In Lyon, entire Protestant neighborhoods were burned. In Toulouse, pregnant women were dragged into streets and beaten before they could give birth to future Huguenots. Survivors were hunted not just by soldiers, but by neighbors, priests, and friends who had shared their bread just a week before. The violence had unshackled something deeper. Hatred passed down through pulpits and royal decrees. And now unleashed, it would not be easily restrained. Those who once lived as respected nobles, lords with titles, property, armed guards were now hunted like animals. Their families fled to Geneva, to Amsterdam, to London, wherever the Reformation had taken hold. But those who stayed, they faced choices no one should ever have to make. Convert or die. Confess and live in shame. Or vanish. Thousands chose to vanish. They buried their names, changed their accents, wore rosaries they didn't believe in. They raised their children Catholic by day and whispered psalms behind locked doors by candlelight. They became the secret Protestants of France, les Nicodemitsa, name taken from Nicodemus in the Gospel of John, the man who followed Jesus. In secret, for fear of the Jews. And for them, the massacre never really ended. It simply became a silence. Meanwhile, at court, something strange began to happen. King Charles IX, barely 22, gaunt, volatile, prone to fits, began to unravel. Had given the order, or at least that's what the world believed. But now, his hands would not stop trembling. He could not sleep. He could not eat. He heard voices, smelled blood where none existed. One courtier wrote that the king would wake screaming in the middle of the night, shouting, "What blood? What murders? What evil counsel I have followed?" He began coughing blood. His skin turned gray. He lashed out at his mother, then begged her not to leave his side. His body decayed, but his mind decayed faster. Within 2 years, he was dead. His lungs eaten from the inside by tuberculosis, and his soul, perhaps, by guilt. Some called it justice. others divine punishment. Catherine de' Medici stood at his bedside, dry-eyed, her power still intact. She would outlive 2 more of her sons, but none would rule France well. And what of the bride? Marguerite, Queen of Navarre, now the wife of a king in name but not in power, remained trapped. She and Henry were prisoners inside the court, watched, controlled, their every move reported. Their marriage, never one of love, became one of cold calculation. But Marguerite was clever. She learned the language of survival from her mother, and like so many women in royal courts, she endured by playing the long game. For years, she kept her Protestant husband alive, even as her Catholic family slaughtered his followers. She flirted, plotted, lied when she had to. She saved his life more than once. Later, they would part ways, but neither would forget the wedding that bound them. The altar built on corpses. The night the bells rang for slaughter instead of celebration. And in her memoirs decades later, Marguerite would describe the moment she realized what her wedding had truly been: a theater, a deception, and a death sentence wrapped in pearls. Today, history remembers the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre as one of the darkest chapters in the French Wars of Religion. But what most people forget is that it all began with a wedding, an invitation sent in peace, a feast attended by thousands,